Hello, sixth graders. So I have the directions here for our entry, which is zooming in. I know this looks different than our usual directions sheet, but this is a pretty complicated entry, so I needed to make a whole separate show just to explain this. So I'm going to go through it with you guys, and hopefully if you have any questions, you can comment or email about those. So our entry today is called Zooming In, and you can see here it says all the actions you are required to do are highlighted throughout the presentation. So if you see this kind of yellowish highlighter anywhere, that means you need to stop and do something. Okay, so feel free to pause the video a bunch of times if you need to. Okay, so here we go. First of all, we're going to talk about what writers do. So, what makes good writing? There might be different things, and I know a lot of times kids like to say capital letters and periods and things like that, but that doesn't make good writing. That makes correct writing. But it's sort of like when you watch a movie and you get to the end of a movie and you think to yourself, that was a great movie. I want to watch it again. It's not because the camera was on correctly. It's because the directors and the writers and the actors did something good. They did something special. It was different. Okay, nobody gets to the end of a movie and thinks that was a great movie. The camera worked correctly. So when we're talking about good writing, we're not talking about the mechanics. We're not talking about capital letters and spelling. We're talking about what makes you get to the end of something and think that was really good writing. So some things that mean good writing include details. Plenty of details for the audience to feel like they're really there with you experiencing it. A purpose. Now, there are only a few purposes of writing. The first purpose of writing is to pass on information. So that might be a textbook or a pamphlet or a calendar or anything like that. Another one is to organize information. So that would be like a shopping list or something like that. Another one is to persuade. So this would be like a political pamphlet or a essay that you may have written, a persuasive essay you may have written in elementary school. And we'll write another one later this year. You might have had it called an argument. And the other purpose, there's two more. There's for personal growth. So this is like a journal entry or something like that. But the other one, the most common that we'll focus on is to entertain. So if you're going to entertain somebody with your writing, you have to think about your purpose. If your purpose is to entertain your audience, you need to make sure that what you're writing will make your audience feel engaged and interested in what you have to say. So again, it's entertaining or interesting to its audience. And that goes for any of those purposes. If you're trying to persuade, that needs to be interesting. Or if you are trying to, what was one of the other ones? If you are trying to give information, it needs to be interesting. So no matter what your purpose is, you need to make sure that you are thinking about your audience and making sure that your audience will understand and be able to enjoy what you have to share with them. Now, on the other hand, we have some writing mishaps. And since we are all pretty new writers, sometimes we make these mistakes. So I want to point them out so you can be aware of them and try to avoid them. One of them is trying to write too much. If you try to write too much, so let me say today our assignment is called a moment. So I want you to really focus on a moment. I don't want you to tell me about a whole vacation that you went to Florida. Because what happens when you do that is, let's say you choose to write your Florida vacation and you start writing in your writer's notebook. What happens is your writing becomes more of a list. It starts to sound like, and then we got on the airplane, and then we waited for 2 hours, and then we got to Florida, and then we drove to our hotel, and then we got checked in, and we went up to our room, and the room was really awesome, and then we went to bed, and then when we woke up in the morning, it was time to go to Disney. So then we got back in a rental car, and we had to go to, do you see how I just keep sort of saying, and then, and then, and then? When your writing starts to do that, it becomes more of a list and less interesting to your audience. Better writing would focus on just one part of that trip, like maybe your favorite ride or roller coaster that you went on. And you just want to focus on that amazing ride, not the car trip to get there or waiting around for your dad to find his second shoe or something like that. Unless those details make the story better, you don't really need to include them. So focus on what's interesting. Now, writing without detail or with too much detail. Again, think about your connection to the audience. So you want to make sure that you're creating a connection to your audience. You don't want to write no detail. We went to Florida. We went to Disney World. It was fun. That's not going to connect to your audience. You also don't want to do what I just talked about, where you're giving so many details that your audience is like, okay, get to the point. So you've really got to think about who you're writing for. And then the last thing is being repetitive. You don't want to keep using the same words or the same vocabulary over and over and over again. For example, there's a word like happy, and we tend to use the word happy all the time. But there's about a million other words we could use for happy. Let me show you something I've got in my classroom real quick. And for those of you who are here, you might have noticed this. One word that we use a lot in our writing is the word said. So if you look up here, and you might not be able to see these posters, but what they are is it says instead of the word said, use one of these. And there are hundreds of words up on those posters that I've written that have more meaning. So instead of said, you could use whispered or shouted or mumbled or any other word that sort of gives emotion with the vocabulary word. That really helps our writing. Okay, let's move on. I promise this is the longest slide. Let me move my little self out of the way. Okay, so here's what you're going to do. Notice there's highlighting, so you need to pause the video in just a moment. Pause the video on the slideshow, create a slide in your writer's notebook, and title it The Last Kiss Analysis. Don't forget to add today's date. The Last Kiss is a story I'm going to read to you. It's not something about kissing, okay? So pause the video. I'm going to put up what it should look like. Make a slide that just looks like this. It's called The Last Kiss Analysis and today's date. That's it. Okay? Now, back to the slideshow. Let's hope that loads faster. Okay. So, now that you have that slide and it's ready, okay, we're going to move on to the next slide here. Next thing. You are going to click here in just a minute to hear me read a short story out loud. It's only a few minutes long. It's called The Last Kiss, and it's by Ralph Fletcher. While you are listening to the story, I want you to think about this focus question here, okay? Focus question. As you're listening, try to think about why this moment was important enough for the author to not only remember it so well, but also to choose to write about it years later. He's writing about his last kiss. So as you're reading or listening, I want you to think, why was this important to Ralph Fletcher? Why was it important enough for him to write about? At the bottom, you see some highlighting. When you're done listening, go to your slide that you just created that said Last Kiss Analysis and write in complete sentences to answer the focus question. I want to know your thoughts on that question. Pause the video here, click on that link. Okay, we are back. So now you should have listened to me read you a short story, and you should have gone onto your virtual writer's notebook and answered the focus question on your slide. So here's what we're going to do now. I want you to collaborate with your classmates, which means I want them to know what you're thinking, and I want you to know what they are thinking. So I posted a question on Google Classroom. The question is about the author's purpose and the jellyfish. Why did Ralph Fletcher talk about jellyfish? You have to realize that when an author is writing something, they get to choose what they write. So why jellyfish? He could have left that whole part out or talked about something else. Why did the author want to include this little side story about jellyfish? So go on to Google Classroom. Again, you're going to pause this video. There should be a posted question about why the author chose to include jellyfish. I want you to answer that question, and then I want you to read your classmates' answers. If you can, and this is the first time I'm trying this, so I want to see how it works. If you can, I want you to read read multiple other people's comments, but I want you to respond back to two classmates, okay? So you're going to answer the question, and then you're going to respond to two other people to talk to them about their thoughts. You guys might disagree, but that doesn't mean anybody's wrong. That's the magic of language arts. There are multiple correct answers all the time. So pause the video, go answer the question, and write those comments. I'll meet you back here. Okay, we are back. I think I'm going to get rid of me here because I'm a little bit too big for this. I'm going over some of the words. Okay, I'll put me. Nope, just going to get rid of me. Bye, guys. Keep watching, though. Okay, so now you see a lot of highlighting on this slide. So we're going to kind of go through like we did with important places and with important people, and we're going to start by going to your 100 stories entry. Okay, see it's highlighted. Go to your 100 stories entry and thinking about a very brief moment that you think you'll remember vividly 40 years from now, make a list of memorable moments that stand out to you. So just like Ralph Fletcher remembered this last kiss with his dad, what are some moments that you think you'll remember when you are an adult? Okay, so start by going to your 100 stories and coming up with at least a few memories. Then you're going to choose one and you're going to make a new slide in your digital writer's notebook, and this one's called a moment. Okay, you also need to put the date on this, which I realize now I forgot on the slide, but put the date and call it a moment. Then you're going to set a timer for about 15 or 20 minutes and get to writing. Remember, we're building writing stamina, so don't stop early. This is you writing your own little moment that you think you'll remember forever. Think about the last kiss as kind of a model for this. When you're done, turn it in, just like we've turned in everything else. Click the Add and Create button and upload your writer's notebook from Drive. Then click Turn In. If you need a model beyond the hearing the last kiss, go ahead, go to My Writer's Notebook under Resources, and you can see my entry for this assignment. I hope that this makes sense. I hope you guys are doing well. This is kind of a complicated assignment because you're going to have 2 slides added. You're going to have the slide called A Moment, and you're going to have the slide called Last Kiss Analysis. I'll be looking for both of them as I grade this assignment. Good luck.